Okay, so just gave quizzes back, and if you're online, you get those back on Sunday when you submit them. And I wanted you to know that I think it was last Thursday in class after we took this quiz for the in-person class, there were some comments about question, what is it, number 8. Yes, there were some questions about question number 8 about countries in the world being in stage 5, like being fully in stage 5. It was a true-false question. So I think a couple of y'all made a comment in class when we were discussing it. Oh, there was this question on the test, and what was the answer to that? So I thought, ooh, if this was a confusing question, if this was a misleading or confusing question, that'll show up for me. Like if everybody in the classroom, or 12 out of 15 of you, missed that question, then that tells the instructor there was something bad about that question. Okay? And if that happens, what my practice is number one, it's my fault, not yours, because I either didn't teach you correctly, or I wrote the question wrong or something, right? It was confusing for some kind of way. So I looked carefully at people's responses to that question, because if I had had a whole bunch of people miss it, I would have thrown it out and added a point to everybody's quiz. But there really weren't very many people who missed it. There were more people actually who made 10 out of 10 on this quiz than missed question 8 or any other question, commonly any other question. But I just want you to know that if you notice, if you're getting papers back from a teacher, any teacher, and you notice that you and everybody around you seem to have gotten the same question incorrectly, bring that up to them, because we should, own those questions that we give you, and whether they are written in a confusing way, and therefore you give an answer that you're like, what? I'm not sure what the answer should be. Or maybe I ask you a question that we really haven't covered yet in class, right? That's not fair either. So that usually comes up with how people perform on particular test questions. So always let me know, always let politely any of your teachers know that you've noticed that pattern, because we should take care of that for you, okay? So I did notice that some of y'all had a question about that, but there weren't enough folks on the quiz who missed that question for me to throw it out and add a point to everybody's quiz. So next time, hopefully I won't make a mistake, but next time, if I do, it'll be my mistake, not yours, okay? Alrighty, so one more thing, I am busy grading tons of stuff. I had sociology projects and cultural geography projects due over the weekend. I've been grading them diligently. I have to go through slowly because I can't get grumpy while I'm grading, because then the first one that I grade, which I'm all happy and sunshine about, might get a higher grade than the 5th one, and I'm like, am I still grading? I can't do that. So I have to grade them in chunks, where I'm happy through the whole chunk, and then stop, and then come back when I'm happy and grade another chunk, right? So I will be grading things at 5 or 10 at a time, and there's 125 of you with me this semester. So I will grade them as in the order they were turned in, and you'll get that grade back from me as soon as possible. Everybody within a week. Okay, so I think we're ready to talk about Chapter 4. We're going to spend today talking about Chapter 4 topics. Please notice this reading assignment that I have on the board for you over here. I have taken a picture of it, and I will be posting a picture of it in our Blackboard folder for week 5. But this week and next week, we're going to be this week, we're going to be looking at Chapter 4 and 5 together. 4 primarily today, and then next week we will be looking at 5 and 6 together, and maybe work our way like the schedule says on the syllabus. Maybe we will be into Chapter 7 before midterm hits. But we're about 3 weeks from midterm, and what that means for you is that in about 3 weeks, we're going to have, in about 2.5 weeks, I will open up Project 2. I will create and open up Project 2, which is another 100-point assignment. And you will have 5 days a week somewhere in there. I've got to have you turn it in before my midterm grade calculation, so you have half your points earned the first half of the semester and half your points earned the second half of the semester. So anyway, about 2.5 weeks from now, we will do our second round, our second project. And I noticed when I was looking at the syllabus, where I have the 4 projects listed, I actually swapped project 2 and 3. I think project 2 on the syllabus says that you're going to do, you're going to do a geographic analysis of like a religion or race and ethnicity, stuff like that. And then project 3 was listed as like discussion questions. So so I mixed those up and didn't notice until just now when I'm looking at the schedule. So the project 2 will come from 4, 5, and 6, and maybe part of 7. Okay? Good. All right. So chapter 4, to me, we've been talking a whole lot about logistical kind of stuff having to do with human geography, movement, all of the issues of Mr. Help, immigration, how do people get from one place to the next, how do populations rise or decline. All of these are vital, foundational components of understanding human geography. But this, to me, is where we get into some of the fun part, because we get to talk in chapter 4 about culture specifically. And culture is so diverse and broad and all-encompassing that that's why it's fun to me to talk about culture. Okay, so let's get a working definition of just this concept, culture in general. You with me, Victoria? Don't text. Don't text or use your phone while you're in class. I think I am going to ask you to look something up on your phone before we're finished with class today. But right now, it's me. Okay? All right, so culture. Culture is a complex system of, and get ready for your nouns in a series. I'm going to put commas after commas after commas after long stuff, okay? So it's a complex system of customs, beliefs, traditions, norms, material objects, values, knowledge. I can keep on going. Y'all want some more? Y'all want some more nouns in this series?
Also, sentences are statements.
Not knowledge and ideas. Yep. I'll spare you. I'll put a period right there at the end of that sentence. There's a key word I've left out of it though, as I look at it right now. Do what? Shared. 2 keywords, shared and learned. Absolutely. So all of these customs, beliefs, traditions, all of these things that I just wrote, they have to be shared among people. And of course, in geography class, when we look at who shares them, we're going to look at regions, we're going to look at places, we're going to look at locations, we're going to look at movement of ideas from those regions, locations, places, out into other parts of a cultural landscape. We're going to be looking at all of those different aspects. Let me see. Shared among groups and learned from one generation to the next. So what we notice, what cultural geographers notice is, don't use your watch either. Don't use your phone or your watch in class to communicate with anybody.
So I've got a family emergency, so that's why.
Okay, if you need to use the phone or watch, you are always free to step out of the class. But it's just distracting for me. So I'm like that dog on, what is it, the Up, that has like, squirrel, that's me. So it's just distracting. So you are, any of you, anytime, are absolutely welcome to mosey on out and go to the bathroom, go get nachos, go use your phone, but not in class. Okay? Okay, so, squirrel, back to culture. Okay, let me get back on track. So, yes, complex system is the first key set of keywords here in this definition, because all of these things that I've separated by commas here are linked together and form a structure that is shared among groups of people and learned from one generation to the next. None of us are born with any kind of program on our DNA knowing anything about how to use, what the norms are in our society, what the values are that we follow, knowledge or ideas that are dominant in our society. We don't have that pre-programmed in us. So that's where this learned process from one generation to the next and shared among groups comes into play. And in geography, we notice an odd, well, it's not odd to geographers, but new geographers notice a pattern. We can notice a pattern in our location, in our place, in our region, where we have local culture centers. Local culture centers within, let's look at large urban areas, for instance, like if anyone's ever been to New York City or San Francisco, Los Angeles, even Chicago to a certain extent, Houston, huge urban area, you will find local, you can use the word subcultures, you can find local groups that have similar customs, beliefs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that usually occupy the same general location, the same perceptual region. Sometimes there are definite boundaries for the formal region where Little Italy is in New York City, for instance. I'm putting my air quotes around that because that's the name of a distinct neighborhood or community group. Local culture centers are communities. They are places where people tend to feel at home, feel a part of the fabric of society, on a smaller scale than, say, the USA as a whole. So if the USA has a great big umbrella that has a culture as part of it, and it does, doesn't it? We say American culture or USA culture. I'm trying to train myself to say USA culture because I have started thinking about one of my classmates in my Heritage Studies program up at Arkansas State University posed the question whether the word American was a racist word. It's an interesting concept because we have, let's look at this map over here. Turn the video around so you can see the map. I don't know where my video is. But anyway, so this map over here, all of this is America, right? But when we say American, who are we talking about?
United States.
Usually USA, right? Usually we're talking about USA when we talk about, when we talk about the word American. Anyway, so yeah, USA culture, we have a USA culture, but can it be broken down into regions with specific cultural characteristics, specific traditions? I see some head shaking, so I'm going to ask you to give me examples if you agree with that.
You could say the Bible Belt.
There we go. We've talked about the Bible Belt before in this perceptual region. Now, if I asked you to draw me a circle around what you think of as the Bible Belt, your circle and my circle might not overlap because it's a perceptual region, right? But in that perceptual region, I might have different characteristics that say Bible Belt to me than you do also, but a lot of them are probably going to be overlapping because we are using that as a category of customs, beliefs, traditions, norms, everyday behaviors that correspond to mostly to that region of the country. Sir?
Isn't the Bible Belt not a perceptual region but a formal region? Considering it's an actual...
Somebody else. Okay, so his question is, isn't the Bible Belt a formal region? What is your answer to that?
No.
Why?
Because there aren't exactly written down areas and it overlaps between what I think it is as opposed to what he thinks. So if it were a formal region, we would think that it's the same idea.
There's not boundary lines.
Okay, so there's not, so we have a couple people talking about formal regions have boundary lines. They are defined by, say, geopolitical borders. And so, yes, so your example of there's a general area where we can debate about where the boundaries are and what states are included. Is that not your question?
That's not what I was talking about.
Oh, what, I'm sorry, we
I
misunderstood
mean,
your
by
question.
formal region, I mean like it's, like say, I mean, the Bible Belt usually, I mean, it's always in, like, between the south and the north, and like right there in the middle area. That's usually where everyone says the Bible Belt would be, because that's
Is
where the data is that there's, because everyone's done studies and all that.
I hear a lot of description that sounds like it falls under the perceptual region concept, because also, where's the north and the south? Where's the north and the south? Right?
Where's that
So,
line?
but in the north and the south, back to culture, like, and is there a line, right? We really like lines, don't we? We really like borders between things. We're really accustomed to that. But back to north and the south, not just the Bible Belt, like Skylar's example, which is excellent, but are there different ways of, I left language off of this list here. I should have put it there when you said sentences and thoughts and ideas. But language in general, can you look at the way people form and use language and identify at least perceptual regions between north and south, east, west, midwest, deep south, any of these things? Such as, do you know an example?
My aunt's from the north, and so when she moved down here, they're at my grandma's house getting, stuff ready for dinner, and my mom goes, "I'm fixing to go do this," and she goes, "You mean you're about to go do such and such?" Or like, try to,
Oh,
like,
okay.
correct her and stuff
I'm
like that.
fixing to go do something
Like there's
as a
slang.
marker of Southern slang.
Yeah.
And your aunt wanted to say
It's like,
instead,
"Don't you mean you're going to go do?"
you're going to go do something. Oh, okay. There's a good
Something
one.
along the
That's
lines that.
kind of true. I've never thought about that one before. Usually the biggest one I get with the north-south distinction is y'all versus you guys, or soda versus
Oh, yeah.
a Coke. Those kinds of changes. So these are parts of the cultural landscape. These are human characteristics in the cultural landscape. Later on in this reading assignment for chapter 4, you'll talk about the imprint, a cultural landscape being the imprint that humans have on the environment around us. And that imprint is definitely in physical form, like we're standing in this room right now, like, we come up this hill and there's a nice wide 4-lane divided road, and all of these are definitely physical imprints. But also the purpose for which this building, it's not a concert hall. Well, we have one, but not this building, right? It's not a dance party place. Raves don't happen here. But those kinds of things do happen in other areas, right? Where popular culture, which is another key term, let me put on the board here, popular culture, kind of dominates. Whose hand was that? Brandon, did you? Yeah.
So I grew up in South Phoenix, so for the longest time I thought the area looked a lot more like Mexico. So for my first 5 years of being alive, I thought it was from Mexico because it just looked like I'm going to go visit. It just looks exactly like Mexico.
It does.
Yeah.
Arizona and New Mexico itself look very much, Southern California look very much like Mexico, and guess what? The majority of Western history in this location, it was a part of Mexico, right? Yeah, so anyway, yes, these kinds of ideas, these concepts can become part of the overall schema by which we live. Local cultures, you see an interesting trend in which people congregate together in neighborhoods of like-minded individuals, like-minded communities, right? The Amish community, for instance, the Dutch population in Pennsylvania, or the Mormon population in the Utah, general area of the West, Utah and surrounding areas. But all of these things get mentioned in chapter 4 as parts of the cultural landscape, parts of local flavors of different cultures. Okay, so what does that mean? Or why is that included in a definition of culture?
Take a look at Big Ben or the Easter Island heads or any sort of
Okay.
culture.
Okay, so good. I like the word that you used, artifact. This word artifact has multiple meanings. For instance, my archaeologist friends think about these things as material objects that are left behind from past civilizations, past groups. But artifacts are, you know what, this marker I'm holding, this is technically an artifact of culture. The sweatshirts and the lanyards and stuff that some of us have on, all of these are, in a modern sense, in a cultural geography or cultural anthropology sense, artifacts that have a purpose and a use in culture today, okay? So yes, there are definite markers like the Easter Island heads and Big Ben, did you say? Those definitely are part of a cultural landscape. UNESCO, World Heritage Sites. Have you heard of UNESCO, which is an agency within the United Nations? Good. I see some people have heard of it before. This is where I want you to look up on your cell phones, please. A list of, just ask Siri or put it in Google, look up UNESCO Cultural Heritage Sites or UN World Heritage Sites would work also. You can look at the images that come up at the top and you will see, I think not Big Ben is on there.
Great Barrier Reef.
The Great Barrier Reef is, I think, the first one that's listed. There's a lot of physical geography locations, but also cultural geography locations. Big Ben is not on there, but the tower, the Palazzo in Venice is on there. What is it called? I can't remember.
Leaning Tower of Pisa?
No. Anyway, you have to scroll through a long list because all over the world, these are World Heritage Sites that are part of cultural preservation efforts so that local cultures can still retain an identity and not kind of be overtaken by globalism and global culture. Many cultural geographers point out that local culture is, in some cases, lost. The different flavor of local culture is in some places lost in a capitalist society. What does this fancy stuff mean? What'd you say?
That it's just being like commercialized.
That commercialization can kind of take over. I can't remember where it was. In Arkansas, very recently, there were several historic buildings that were falling down. They were like little sharecropper shacks, I guess you would say. But they had historic significance for the tree farmer Wilson over in the Delta of, what was his first name? I can't remember his. Today is not a good day for me to remember these details. Anyway, so historically, there was a tree farmer, a very important capitalist named Wilson who contributed significantly to East Arkansas culture and tree harvesting and this kind of thing. And he had on his property a lot of migrant workers, a lot of slaves, and freed slaves, and who served basically as sharecroppers and low-paid wage earners. And he had some shacks on his property from way back when that had been preserved, but not well to preserve them into posterity. And it was Walmart or some big other corporation, I don't want to pick on just Walmart, you know, because there's lots of those, that wanted to build a new supercenter. And this land was favorable because now that land is near a highway system in the cultural landscape, near an exit in the highway system. And so they bought this and tore down these shacks. So, Lucas, are you with us?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out the name of the guy.
Okay.
I couldn't find anything about it.
Okay, back with us. So, so they tore it down, and here's a question. Here raises a question also about what is important culturally, and how do we decide? We as a society, we as a local culture, we as a national culture. How do we decide in the hierarchical culture? Who knows the meaning of this word?
Like the levels of who's in charge.
Who's in charge, right? There are different levels, different superiority, inferiority, and things in between.
Chain of command.
Right? Chain of command is a good way to think about this. When we think about a cultural hierarchy, do we typically, and that list of UNESCO sites that we just looked at, do we typically think of common houses, houses where impoverished people reside? That hillside in that video that we watched in Brazil where they didn't have proper sanitation? do we think of those as valuable cultural assets
No.
in the cultural hearth to preserve as a marker of cultural identity for generations moving forward? Why? It's not, so there isn't a barrio or anything like that. The slums in India that we see in movies like Slumdog Millionaire and other movies like that. We don't see those listed anywhere on UNESCO World Heritage Sites.
No, but we see places like Monticello or Jefferson.
We see places like Monticello where significant historic figures have lived in their lifetime. We see maybe significant places in the natural landscape where we know some kind of historic event occurred, right? But this hierarchical culture can kind of dictate. We can find inequality in society by looking at the kinds of things that are listed on that UNESCO World Heritage Site list, the kind of things that are preserved for posterity, right? So there's a hierarchy in culture. Local cultures, I think I didn't finish my concept earlier when I was talking about many geographers and cultural anthropologists worry that local cultural identity can be lost, and that's where the Walmart Superstore story came in, because if any of you have ever traveled out of state, I'm sure you've been on major highways and interstates for significant portions of the time. I think you told me you went to Arizona over the holidays. Did you drive?
Yeah.
Do you happen to notice, I didn't ask you this question ahead of time, but did you happen to notice, can you give us a ballpark of how many Walmarts you could see from the super?
In Arkansas, more
Oh,
than
in Arkansas more than other places.
Yeah.
Why? Why in Arkansas?
Because it's
Because it started here. Sam Walton was right here in Arkansas. But yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, that's probably why, since it started in Arkansas, that's probably why I kind of pick on Walmart a little bit. But it's any big superstore, like Kroger marketplaces and Costco and Sam's and all of these big box stores, right, that are popping up all over the place. And when you're traveling from one place to the next, in this cyclical migration pattern of tourism or visiting family out of state or any of these things, and you pass through a tiny little town, really, what kind of flavor for the local culture do you get as an outsider passing through? Oh, that's the place where the Walmart is on the right-hand side of the interstate instead of the left-hand, it's on the south side. So a lot of times, local culture is kept very specific to the community, and cultural diffusion, to use a word from chapter 1, where elements of behavior, elements of beliefs, traditions, norms, any of these things on this list over here, travel from their origin position to other places. And in a capitalist world, a global world, many times local cultures will be affected by things from completely opposite sides of the world. I don't think in England, Arkansas, there's a Kroger where I say, y'all know where England, Arkansas is? Tiny little town between here and Stuttgart. Yeah, pretty much smack dab. And y'all know where Stuttgart is? I don't know, toward the east, maybe a little south from here. Yeah, so these are small Arkansas towns. They are cultural centers for agriculture, but not for popular culture, which we'll go back to here in just a second. And not in England, but I believe in Stuttgart, there is a sushi counter in the Kroger store.
The Kroger shut down like 2 years, not 2, it was like 12 years ago. I'm from Stuttgart.
Oh, are you from Stuttgart? Okay. Yeah, so where did this Stuttgart is like the center of the rice capital. Rice and duck capital of the world, right? Isn't that their local marker, right? Okay, for their local culture with a sushi counter, right? And so we see this globalized access because of technology, because of, can I use the word advancement? Is that a judgmental, is that placing judgment on, is it advanced? to have a sushi counter or to have technology or to have, this kind of, is it advanced or is it maybe a detriment to the flavor of local communities, local cultures? What do we value about local communities and local cultures, and what are we told to value about local communities and culture? What do you think? Are we told what to value? Those sharecropper shacks? If we go and tour, you said Monticello, right? Monticello is how I should pronounce it. I think it is Monticello. Yeah. The town in Arkansas is Monticello, but the President Jefferson's house is Monticello. When you tour that as a visitor there, it's only been just recently that you will also be pointed out and given a tour of the slave quarters that still stand. Another famous individual in Georgia and the North and South Carolina borders right there with Georgia, James Vann is a historic figure who was actually half Cherokee Indian and half Anglo. And he was a plantation owner and was extremely cruel, according to historic records, to his slaves. But his huge mansion that he lived in, full of its southern charm, is preserved and open for people to tour.
We went to
And-
Washington's.
Mount
house.
Vernon,
Mount
exactly.
It's so small. Like the slave quarters are so small compared to like
So
the
small
house.
and very, very, very different, and you didn't always get access to those slave quarters, right? Because who's the driver of? And as a matter of fact, James Vann's house in Georgia, if you tour that now, the guide will take you to like this root cellar and show you where the root cellar, everything that was in here, and then there's a door that exits the root cellar that if it's open, she will briefly say, this is where the slaves entered and that's where they lived, and close the door. So, who gets to decide what's important in society or not? And why aren't? Look at the population of people, as you recall, the images of that hillside in Brazil that we looked at in that video. I think I asked y'all, how many thousands of people do you think live there? And y'all gave me some kind of estimate. So, what is cultural heritage? What is local culture? And how free, really, are individuals in preserving the customs that give each of these local places throughout the United States, throughout the world, their individual flavor, their identity as unique places. We don't want placelessness where all we see are the box stores along the interstate, but what is the local flavor of those cultural centers? And so that's really what Chapter 5 gets into when we move to that on Thursday. We will talk about how in urban areas at least, we don't really focus on the rural cultures, but in urban areas how different communities segregate, can I use that word? Just meaning separate from otherness, voluntarily separate from otherness so that they can congregate in like-minded groups of people. I did some ethnographic research a couple of years ago in the heart of the Hispanic community in Little Rock, Arkansas. Anybody know where the heart of the Hispanic community is in Little Rock, Arkansas? The Southwest region? Oh, sorry, I answered before. Yeah, so the Southwest region is the heart of the Hispanic community, and people congregate there because of like-mindedness, because of community, because of that local cultural flair. You think it will be on a tour of the city of Little Rock? Because we do have a company called Little Rock Tours. It takes you all over, but also gives you, important places to go and see and experience while you're in Little Rock. So, hierarchical culture is a very interesting concept, right? to think about in terms of this, I always tend to look at elements of geography, elements of culture that promote and continue inequalities in society, and this is not free of those influences. This chapter that seems kind of maybe fun and interesting and non-controversial, right? But when we look through history, when we look through just our lifetime, you can find that there are some customs, to use a phrase from the book Animal Farm. Have y'all read the book Animal Farm? If you haven't, I hope you do. But some customs are more equal than others. Remember that phrase where some animals were more equal than others? And that's how they explained how the pigs rose to power on the farm. Yes, so some beliefs are more equal than others, some traditions are more equal than others, and so those are the kinds of things that we can study in cultural geography. Please add comments and questions while I'm erasing this. And I know we haven't talked about this yet, I'm going to come to this in just a second.
The hierarchical culture just seems like whatever is most expensive.
The hierarchical culture seems what's the most expensive? Why? What example do you mean?
In the UK, a lot of the universities were, founded using donations from people who had colonized specific regions of Africa. So they're putting like geographical markers at their universities, and it seems like the only reason that they're studying those, or the only reason they're now putting any kind of attention to it, is because there's people donated them, and they should probably I don't know.
So the examples, I'm just going to repeat a little bit of that because I know that the online students didn't hear your comments. So, and correct me as I go through if I missed a part. So certain universities in Great Britain were funded and founded by people who colonized Africa. And though you didn't say it, let me add some commentary about that. Normally, when Britain, France, Portugal, all of these empirical powers throughout history, I'll get you in just a second, colonized a place, it was the intentions were to force their version of improvements onto the place. And if there was any wealth there, like for instance in the conquest of the Americas, gold and silver and those kinds of natural resources were really on the minds of the conquistadors. Religion was also on the minds of the conquistadors. And so, yes, when these colonizing people used the new resources that they took in their colonization, they can go back and open these universities that you're talking about, and now the students probably learn about the wonderful philanthropy of these people. Philanthropy meaning, donating the buildings, donating the land, donating the money for these universities, and how wonderful these individuals are, while smoothing over maybe the oppressive component of the colonizing process to begin with.
Yeah, and even just putting up like artifacts around the university, they wouldn't necessarily be there because they were bought by colonizers as opposed to somebody remaining in Africa.
Cultural appropriation, one of the concepts from chapter 4, and I'm sure it's in the sections that I've asked you to read in chapter 4. Yes, so I'm taking these things as part of my conquest, really. So I have some sort of series of masks from ceremonies from the tribe that I pillaged in Africa when I was colonizing it, for instance, and these are on display now in Great Britain. Or there's also issues with Egyptian artifacts that are spread all over the world in museums, and really who owns that and who should benefit from these kinds of things. These are all really valid questions, really our day and age kinds of valid questions when we're talking about the artifacts and material objects that are specific to a culture. Great point.
My comment's not going to be nearly as great as yours, but
Of course it will. It'll be just as great as
I was going to kind of work off of using Arkansas as an example and also kind of talk about finance. Look at any advertisement thing for Arkansas. We talk about nature, which we can sell tours, zip lines, mounts, all of that. And then we talk about, I just had the name of it, hot springs and the horse races there.
Hot springs
That's
and the
like
horse
any
races,
commercial,
nature,
anywhere I hear about
ecotourism.
Arkansas mentions one of those two things. We don't talk about any historical thing we have. We don't talk about Big Dam Bridge. We talk about stuff that we can get money out of.
Yeah,
It's
so
like-
that's another good point. So back to the capitalist use, I mean, you're talking about a capitalist kind of theme also in the conquest or colonization and appropriating cultural components from one place and making them part of, say, the British landscape. But here, with our place, with,
That's what it's called.
yeah, Oaklawn racetrack and casino now, right? Yeah, so yeah, so you hear Oaklawn being promoted. You know, I've heard about the casino in Pine Bluff being promoted a lot too. What's it called? I don't remember the name of it yet. I will know it soon, like the back of my hand, because we will, like you're saying, we will hear about it like crazy. Because yes, part of what we come to think of as important parts of our physical or cultural heritage comes from what's being promoted. What's the big moneymaker, right? Not typically, well, just to use the phrase that UNESCO uses, UNESCO calls all that list of things heritage sites. Heritage sites. Our cultural heritage. In heritage studies, in policy making that addresses what is going to be considered heritage or not, we have a concept called dark heritage. And dark heritage includes things like the parking lot that was built over a Native American burial ground, for instance. Or dark heritage includes the slums in India that's not promoted in the tourist advertisements like you're pointing out about Arkansas. Dark heritage might be the fact that the huge tree outside the courthouse is where many lynchings took place. You go see the courthouse as this beautiful example of whatever kind of architecture it might be, but what's a lynching?
A forcible hanging.
Not just a forcible hanging, including forcible hangings. It was castrations, it was disembowelments, it was bloodletting, it was burning alive, it was et cetera, by the will. Yes, that's a lynching. Yes, lynching includes way more than hanging. Yes. Lynching includes death by all those kinds of torturous things. That, and those kinds of things are part of our heritage too. Part of, I've erased the definition of culture, but it includes customs, traditions, rituals, knowledge, processes, practices, all of those kinds of things. All right, so anyway, there's a difference between heritage and dark heritage, and dark heritage is a part of the historic reality, a part of the cultural landscape, but you're right, the hierarchy of culture, the hierarchy of promotion of these different kinds of things, this is not going to bring in patrons to Oaklawn racetrack, right? If we talk about, while you're here, you can see where this kind of unfortunate, terrible event that we're ashamed of now, but was reality in the cultural landscape then, happened.
And you think, like, they don't talk about, like, stuff like that, like when they teach the American Revolution and stuff, they don't talk about how many people died in the process of all of that. And I just finished this series called Washington Spies, where, like,
Oh, the
Came to life.
Washington Spies, what's channel is that on? Did you tell me?
AMC.
AMC? Okay.
Yeah, they do, and it shows you, like, how many people, like, it brings to light, like, how many people actually had to die for our freedom, and, like,
Right, and that's one of, I haven't seen this show, Washington Spies, that you're talking about, but that's one of the trends that you see in cultural preservation. One of the trends that you see in human geography in general is instead of glossing over and ignoring dark heritage, it's not in your face yet, right? But we definitely are owning more of the shameful parts of our past that really contribute to the identity of who we are today, but it's not the Pollyanna. Y'all know Pollyanna, that old movie from when your grandma was born? Anyway, Pollyanna was this little girl who always looked on the bright side of life, of everything. She had the best optimistic outlook. And so today, you can say that somebody who has a Pollyanna attitude is always happy, always optimistic. Those kinds of things. So anyway, yeah, dark heritage is part of the cultural landscape also. Okay. Any other questions or comments? That was good discussion. Okay, so one of the concepts that you've read about, I think it was mentioned, I think the term was mentioned in chapter 1, but let's investigate it now. A cultural hearth. What is a hearth?
Looks like a fireplace.
It's on a fireplace. Yeah, we use this word hearth. It's on a fireplace. It's kind of the location on the fireplace where you can put the wood that's going to go into the fire. You can have your fireplace tools, and it's kind of like your working platform where you're building that fire. Okay, the word hearth, at least in history, the hearth was the central place in the home, because it provided your food, it provided your energy, it provided all of the warmth in the household, all of those kinds of things. So there was a huge hearth, typically as big as you could get, in households, and that was considered the center of the home. So it's not an accident that this word hearth is used here in cultural geography when we're talking about centers where ideas and where customs, traditions, beliefs begin and spread from, okay? So these are centers where culture begins, we can say. And let me say elements of culture. Let me erase this and add something to it. Let me say elements of culture begin and spread from. So let me transition over here to this map while y'all are writing the rest of this down. Oh, and for online students, I've got a picture of this that I'm going to post and go over with you. But you see these circles that I made on this map over here? Different kinds of places. We've already pointed out some of the biases in this map, right, from 2-3 weeks ago. So the equator's like down here, so it's showing, it's showing the northern hemisphere bias. But these circles on the map show, let me start here. What is this circling? Mexico or Central America in general. How about this region? What are the countries in this? This is in South America. We've got Peru and Chile and these kinds of areas, yes. It might be easier for you to see if you turn around and look at that larger map. Yeah, we've got this central equatorial, subequatorial region of Africa where there's lots of rivers. This is the Congo Delta, almost as big as the Mississippi River Delta, but not quite. We've got the Nile River Valley. We've got the Tigris and the Euphrates. What's the name of that region for you history folks? Mesopotamia, excellent. And then the Indus River Valley in India, and then of course all of these tributaries, the Yangtze, all these rivers in China over here on this biased map that chops the largest continent in the world in two, so it can put USA in the middle. Okay, so I've circled these regions. And I've given you some descriptions of the place. These locations that I've circled are general. They are perceptual regions, but we have historic data that shows these are the centers, these are the cultural hearths where what you and I would call civilization began. Okay, these are our civilization centers. Okay, you've studied in world history probably Egypt and the link Egypt has with Western culture, right? And clearly Mesopotamia, the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley, the link that it has with Western culture. Maybe not so much you've studied, hopefully I'm wrong, but maybe not so much you've studied Central America, this region in South America, the Indus River Valley, places in China, as also cultural hearths, centers where in this case, let me put air quotes around the world, civilization began. Because when I say the word civilization, what question do I want to ask? I put air quotes around civilization because civilization implies progress. Does it? What does civilization mean to you when you hear that word? What's the opposite? Let me start like this. What's the opposite of civilization? Uncivilized, but
Oh,
do what?
Like doing things the right way.
You know what? Civilization has components of this notion that you're doing things the proper way. Yeah, I put air quotes around civilization because it implies the word advancement. Advancement is a hierarchy. Erase the word hierarchy, but advancement is a hierarchy word, right? That makes us think of something here versus something here, right? So I'm mentioning this because the USA is in the center of this map over here where I've circled these spots. Europe is over here north of that African region. Do you see any circled regions in the United States, in Europe, as centers or cultural hearths of society as we know it today? No, these places that I have circled are the general ideas that we have from archaeological data that show agriculture and larger populations, stage 2 of the demographic transition model, first began. So before stage 2, we had just foraging and living off of whatever the natural environment would provide. And stage 2, you see beginning in all of these different cultural locations that I've circled on the map. Because people developed customs, traditions, habits, processes in order to support larger numbers of people in the population. Fewer babies died, we still had just as many babies, and so you see culture, you see civilizations, here's where that word comes in, larger numbers of people in the population living. Those are examples of cultural hearths. Society, customs, culture began in those places and then spread to surrounding regions. Okay? Historically, archaeologically is, I guess, a better word, that's where the cultural hearths were for horticulture and for small-scale agriculture that enabled this industrial revolution thing that we talked about a few weeks ago to happen in the first place. Okay? Cultural hearths nowadays, when we think about popular culture, we tend to, in geography, we define this and we tend to associate popular culture with events and happenings in urban areas. Urban areas are associated with popular cultural trends. So urban areas would be cultural hearths from which customs, traditions, methods, norms, values, etc., language, all of those things on that culture list happen, originate, develop, mature, and then begin to spread or diffuse to other places and have other cultural influences. There are many examples in the textbook, and I noticed that one of my favorite examples is used in this textbook in chapter 4 also, and that is something that I know you've heard of hip-hop, but have you heard of the hip-hop movement as a social movement? Good. What is hip-hop as a social movement? Anybody know the origins, what it's all about? Oh, that might be a good thing for you to research this week for a reaction paper. But hip-hop, first of all, what is that? What do we think of when we think of music, right? We think of a genre of music. And nowadays, we think of a genre of music, and there are some complaints about the kinds of lyrics and the kinds of subjection of women and these kinds of things, and a lot of the Hollywood version of hip-hop. But the hip-hop movement is something that originated in popular culture in an urban center. Anybody know where it started? Originally in the Bronx in New York, and then LA had a center where hip hop evolved. Also, that's where the East Coast West Coast rivalry came, right? Yes, but originally in the Bronx in New York, the Bronx is an urban area, and the cultural landscape in the Bronx was one of very rundown, neglected ignored buildings, ignored infrastructure, ignored people. The people were not part of the cultural hierarchy, not very high in the cultural hierarchy. They were indeed part, but they were very low and neglected. And there was poverty, there wasn't a lot of opportunity, and some of these same things, you know, you hear me saying all these things, and maybe you can think of examples of places where still, you know, today, many places, there lacks opportunity, lacks economic advancement potential, and that kind of thing. The Bronx was one of these such places. Literally, the infrastructure was crumbling. So the hip-hop movement began in the Bronx as a cultural marker, a part of popular culture where their lyrics reflected the struggles. Originally, I'm talking about back in the 70s, okay? Back in the 70s and the 80s. Originally, the lyrics reflected the flavor of the local culture. It talked about uprising. It talked about playing a white man's game. It talked about succeeding in a white man's world despite the odds. And so it was a very uplift, this hip-hop movement, it's a social movement because it was by oppressed people, for oppressed people, to try to promote social uplift, is really what it is. And so originally, it's a beautiful story actually. You know, a local people developed this entire genre of music that we have today as a mechanism for their own social improvement. One artist from way back then is KRS-One. Y'all ever heard of him? Have you? Good. Okay, you're not nearly as old as I am, but somebody taught you well, right? So, you know what KRS stands for? Knowledge reigns supreme. So he is a rapper who wrote most of his songs. Called for revolution, but he called for a quiet, powerful revolution where you just got smarter than the next person and enabled yourself to achieve social uplift from the hard work that you did, from your own efforts. So, LA, of course, is a place where there is also a cultural center or a hearth of the hip-hop movement. And as we mentioned before, you might have heard the East Coast, West Coast rivalry in the hip-hop movement. There's a part of these two competitive cultural hearths at play there. But where else in the world do you think you're going to experience hip-hop culture and movement these days?
Isn't there a touch of hip-hop in India right now?
It's in India, it's in Korea, it's in Colombia, it's in Mexico, it's in Japan, let's keep on going. I think how many countries of the world are there? Let's not name Libya, I don't think it's there. Do what?
I think it's like 193.
Yes, something like that. Yes, that would take us probably the rest of class to list them all, and we'd have to Google most of them, myself included, right? To know what all the names are, the current geopolitical names are. But anyway, this cultural hearth, the Bronx or LA, you can use this as an example if you do some research on the hip-hop movement and how hip-hop came from a cultural hearth for your reaction paper this week. Make sure you teach yourself the definitions of popular culture, the definitions of cultural hearth, and how this relates to it if you're going to research this. But this movement is worldwide now because the message was one of social inequality and uplift. And this is a cultural message. This is part of the knowledge, this is part of the customs, this is part of the framework of a lot of societies worldwide. Social inequality, poverty versus wealth, job opportunities and educational experiences versus the lack of those things. And these are a human characteristic that we can find motivation from when we have those kinds of adverse experiences, is that creative flair, which is exactly what happened in the hip-hop movement. I'm going to write poetry, I'm going to rap my poetry, I'm going to dance. There's many different elements of the hip-hop movement. Didn't mean to cross that out. It's not just the lyrics, but it's breakdancing and graffiti is part of the hip-hop movement. All of those kind of beatboxing, yes. are part of the hip hop movement. So there's lots of different components of it that have different symbolic meanings behind them. Excuse me, any other questions or comments? Cultural hearts, can you think of anything else that you know of? I know Carla had one because she kind of wrote about it in one of her papers that I wasn't able to give back to her yet, but can you think of any other places that you know something started here and yet we're very far away from it, and so it's diffused over time? Yes, sir.
Usually like rock and roll.
Where did rock and roll start?
Like I would say like Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay, so Memphis is a cultural center. Motown is a music center, right? There's a map, a very interesting section of your reading assignment that talks about Dave Matthews Band. Have you listened to Dave Matthews Band? Where he chose his concert venues specifically to target college communities, right? So it's a map showing where Dave Matthews has had the majority of his concerts in the United States. Right, so all of these kinds of things. Yeah, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Jazz in New Orleans.
As in New Orleans or Chicago or any of those, yes, absolutely.
Democracy from Greece.
Democracy from Greece, absolutely, very good. So that's we want to draw centers of other types of cultural hearts, we can go from the popular culture realm to the political culture realm and find those examples. Very good. Anybody else? Is your hand up?
Yeah,
Scratching?
I'm just sort of like, there are two in my mind, like one is music, one is not. So I'm like, do I want to keep us talking about music? But communism started with Karl Marx, and he was German.
He was
So-
German, yes.
And now
So
it's a thing that we got entire countries.
absolutely. So communism started with one guy's ideas in Germany, absolutely. And so now we have cultural hearts that correspond to that economic or political system, depending upon how you look at it, right? Communism probably an economic system more than a political one, but yeah, excellent. Okay, Wall Street is another economic center, right? Very different than what Karl Marx was writing about. Yeah, what he was writing in opposition of, right? Okay, well, thank you for a good class, and this video will be online soon, so you can review, or anybody who, if you see any of your classmates who had to be absent today, please make sure that you tell them to watch the video. Quiz coming, right? And I will see y'all next time.